listen, Mos Def was asked in the interview what he thought of Drake's music was Drake hip hop, and Mos Def said that Drake was basically a pop artist that made music that was suitable for listening to when you're walking through Target, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't mind having some music in Target. Can you imagine the money you're getting from Target? But that always begs the question, when you talk about hip hop as being a culture and all of the elements that hip hop brings in, Drake, to me, I always felt like Drake was more of a pop artist that happens to be rapping. Like, a lot of people don't even like hip hop. They don't even like what hip hop stands for, or the sound, that hip hop sound with the scratching, the DJ, the b-boying, the breakdancing, the raw emceeing. They like music where people just happen to be rapping to. Like, if you talk to a younger person that does music, you say, what do? They'll be like, well, you know, I sing a little bit, rap a little bit. Usually that means they don't do either well. They like music that they're hearing on the radio that there happens to be rap to it, there happens to be rock or different elements of music all together, but it's not necessarily, you know, what we would consider hip hop. Now today I don't want to hear from Thelonious. I don't want to hear from Slangston Hughes. I don't want to hear from Slick Vic Low. I don't want to hear from even Victor Rogers III. I want to hear from that Leviathan guy. I want to.
I think because that's exactly who is going to speak.
You have the floor, sir.
So, for people who have watched and listened to this podcast before, they're probably aware that I have had one or a few Drake tangents before. I have gone on some RB Graham rants, some mainstream rap rants, as we've debated certain topics that include some comparisons to Drake, or some topics where Drake may have been talked about being included in certain discussions when people are ranking things and things of that nature. I've definitely had my Drake rants, but you know, throughout them, I've tried to maintain, you know, at least an aspect of tactfulness or politeness.
You have it.
I don't have any more tact, restraint, or politeness left when it comes to this. Okay, and I'll build up, but I will say, for starters, I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad that Mos Def said this, because I feel like someone who represents the culture that we represent and that we are practitioners of needed to say this.
We're no longer making excuses for the bullshit. We make excuses all the time.
Exactly.
For shit that isn't that good.
And let's be clear, if people are classifying this as a beef, there's no beef involved. I would cite Mos Def's song Beef, where he breaks down the difference between what people want to call beef and what is not beef. There's no beef whatsoever. He just answered the question accurately and honestly, and it was in no way disrespectful.
He didn't say Drake was a sorry artist. He just said he didn't consider it.
Now, I
had no edge to it, no substance.
However, cannot promise that I will not be disrespectful in how I speak on this topic, because I'm quite sick of the bullshit. And if you, for those who listen to the Luminary podcast that Mos Def does with Dave Chappelle and them and Talib, they talked about Drake recently on an episode where they talked about Drake, Kendrick, Tyler the Creator, and it may have been one other artist who, and they praised these particular artists for being able to carve out their own niche in today's landscape of culture and music. And so they actually talked about, you know, gave them praise, gave Drake and these other artists praise. And some of the points they made, I didn't even necessarily agree with, but they gave them flowers for what they have done, respectfully. So this is just Mos Def answering the question. And with that being said, nothing that he said wasn't true. But I will say this definitively, to quote Jean-Luc Picard himself, the line must be drawn here, this far, and no further, because I'm sick of this bullshit. I'm sick of the excuses that people make.
Tell them why you mad, son.
Talk about our own culture. Let's be clear. Drake is not a good MC. Drake is barely a hip-hop artist. What he does can hardly quantify as hip-hop music. Enough. I've had it up to here with this pseudo hip hop, light-skinned Canadian American, fucking Irish R&B singer who barely sings. He doesn't even sing. He uses computerized technology to simulate singing. And then people want to get into it and start comparing Mos Def, aka formerly known as Mos Def, Yasinbey, to Drake as an artist.
Preposterous.
And people making comparisons like, oh, they both sing. That is not true. Drake does not sing. The difference is Mos Def can actually sing good. He actually knows how to sing. Drake couldn't carry a note if you gave him Stevie Wonder's lungs. Enough with the bullshit. And so what this really is, it seems generational in a lot of ways, but it's not just generational. It really is more than that. It is not a generational issue. It's a cultural contamination issue. And for the last time, I'm sick of it. I'm done with the bullshit of how we give our power for what qualifies as value in the culture that we created is based off of the mainstream commodification of a bunch of white and Jewish executives who sell our own culture back to us. They have taken hip-hop and commodified hip-hop, and then they have determined it based off of how much money it can be made off of it by selling it back to white people. No, we created hip-hop. We determine the standards. We determine what the value is. We determine what is quality and what is not, and what is hip-hop and what is not hip-hop. Recently, KRS-One talked about what happened with the 50th anniversary of hip-hop dedication at the Grammys. Not the Grammys, at the maybe it was the Grammys. Was it the Grammys?
It was a bunch of different stuff, but probably at the Grammys.
But the big profile one,
right,
yeah, at the Grammys.
Right.
And he talked about how he turned down making an appearance as a part of it because that shit is not hip-hop. The Grammys are not hip-hop. They have not represented our culture. They have commodified our culture.
He made a stand. He made a John Luke Card stand in the line. Yes.
And so it's enough. It's enough with the slave rap. Enough with they sell a slave rap, commodified bullshit, and then want to dictate what determines what is quality and what is not quality. What Mos Def stated was absolutely true. Drake is very much a pop artist, and Drake himself has embraced that. Recently on First, if you watch the video, the first person shooter with J. Cole definitively out raps him for the whole song. He said, he compares himself to Michael Jackson. He had basically a Michael Jackson copycat statue of the big Michael Jackson statue. He had a Drake Michael Jackson statue in the video. It was like, look, I'm doing Michael Jackson shit. So then do your Michael Jackson shit. But don't sit here and try to act like, oh, you're
and also,
hip-hop artist.
Before you go further, 1 second.
We don't compare Michael Jackson to John Coltrane. It's not the same fucking thing.
I still get offended when anybody's compared to Michael Jackson. The difference between Michael Jackson and Drake. Michael Jackson has
that's the lane that he's claiming for himself. Yes. Like he's even leaning into that.
There's a different level of talent there. Drake has, I'll give Drake the credit for this as a pop artist. When you can make popular music that's successful fiscally over and over again, that is a talent. But that talent doesn't equate to hip hop, which has always been the anti-establishment. It's just not the same thing. He has talent in his lane for what he does. He can make music that people find popular, that they enjoy. That's fine. But I wouldn't call it him being a high-level hip-hop artist. I just wouldn't say that. To the points that you made.
It is what he does at this point is a hip-hop offshoot at best. But to call
he's rapping,
like,
he's rapping, but it's not.
This is hip-hop. Like this is definitively hip-hop. Okay, what else are we giving a pass to be? And so that's why when we have these debates on the show about, best MCs of their generation, and people often bring up Drake, I'm like, he doesn't qualify. He doesn't actually qualify. And the generation
about that.
And let's look at the numbers beyond the numbers. Let's look at the actual cultural contribution. 50 years from now, people will not be talking about Drake music. When we have the next 50 years of hip-hop commemoration down the line, when we get to 75 and we get to 100, they're not going to be talking about Drake's music.
People actually consider him the greatest artist in the world. I've heard plenty of times, athletes, different people, younger people, people even in our age range, consider him the absolute best. And it boggles my mind.
The question is, at what?
But
what?
I
think we're having a conversation about jazz. We're not going to say Michael Jackson's the best at jazz, but we might say Michael Jackson is the best at making pop music. It's the same thing. We're not going to compare John Coltrane with Michael Jackson. But so why are we comparing Mos Def with Drake? You know whose music we will be talking about 50 years from now when it talks about, and when it comes to the contribution of hip hop, we'll be talking about Yasinbey. We'll be talking about Black Star. We'll be talking about Reflection Eternal. We'll be talking about Mos Def. We will not be discussing champagne 50 years from now.
I think that people are basing it on status and popularity and the output of records that he puts out. But I think that many of those records are quality. It's just a quantity of stuff to keep.
When do we include MC Hammer in the GOAT conversation?
We don't.
When do we include Master P in the GOAT conversation?
We don't.
They sold tons of records. And see, that's to me, that's at the core of the issue, is that we allow the commodification of the culture and how much money white companies and white and Jewish executives can make off of pimping our own culture back to us. We allow that to determine what dictates what is quality of culture. I don't care if you made $1 billion if you don't have 1 billion bars to back it up. That does not determine what is best in the culture. That was never the barometer, but now all of a sudden we're changing the goalpost to say that how much money you make off the commodification of the culture equals what is best in the actual quality content of the art and the craft of the culture. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous when we get into these conversations and we say, oh, we're being the old men on the lawn, or we're being cultural purists, we're being hip-hop snobs and all of this. No, we're actually stating, we're trying to defend the actual culture that was created, because at this point, when it comes to mainstream hip-hop, we're at the point where the commodification of the culture has now superseded the actual culture itself, and that is ridiculous.
I feel like we've been at that point for almost 20 years now.